Ladies and gentlemen, hello, hello in the house. How are you all? Really? Come on, how are you all? All right, that's enough. Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming and supporting Flat Earth Social. This is number 32, I think. We're coming up for our 3rd year birthday in July. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we've got an amazing guest, and we were all going to have Sven. But Sven phoned me and unfortunately couldn't make it again, so it was a bit of a pain. He had some family issues. So I put the phone down to him and I thought, who am I going to get? Who am I going to get? And I went onto Facebook on my computer and this thing came to me, just came to me like this. Someone you should know, someone you should know. And it turned out it was Guy. I'd never met Guy before, I don't know anything about him up until recently. So I thought, well, I'll send him a message, which I did, and fantastically enough, Guy came back and said, would love to. He'd heard of Flat Earth Social, so, you know, that's a really good thing. So, I don't know, I normally start off with, oh, I met this guy 10 years ago or whatever. I have no idea who Guy is. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a wonderful Flat Earth Social for Mr. Tartaria himself, Guy Anderson.
So who am I? That's me. I like to start with that because I think it's important people know exactly
Is that a
who
baker's
I
penny?
am. Pardon?
Is that a baker's penny?
It is, yeah. It doubles up actually for needlework in the evenings. But that's me with my youngest son. About 6 months before they asked me to never come back ever again.
Shouldn't you be doing next month when it's the 33rd?
I thought as soon as you said it was the 32nd, yeah. So I started my career down the rabbit hole by joining the Freemasons, thinking that they were going to tell me things that were occulted. And what I quickly realised was, because I'm not a serving police officer at Scotland Yard, I wasn't going to learn anything at all, and I couldn't get promoted. I was a tattoo artist. It served no purpose. Everybody in that lodge, the people in the background there, they're all flying squad.
Just hit it every so often.
They're all flying squad, and they would join to get promoted through the ranks a lot faster. So my plans to find out who built the pyramids, who's in charge, they went out the window quite quickly. And a year before I was going to be the master of the lodge, I quit. I stayed in just long enough for my youngest son to turn 18, because he wanted to join. My father was a master mason, I was one, and he was desperate to have this knowledge that he thought I had, but I couldn't tell him I didn't. So he quit about 6 months after they asked me not to come back, and having now exposed a bit about them in my book, I don't think I'll be going back ever again. So that's me, and that's the Grand Lodge of the United Kingdom in London. So my journey down the rabbit hole with regard to Tartaria, and I don't know if everybody in here knows what I'm talking about, but it's yeah? Anybody that doesn't? Is there anyone that doesn't know what? So, it's what you would have called the Mongolian Empire, except it wasn't the Mongolian Empire, that never existed. It's Tartaria, which was really the Northern Hemisphere, so Russia, China, Eastern Europe, and going into America, that's Tartaria, and they whitewashed history. And this guy here is called Anatoly Fomenko, and he's a Russian scientist that worked out that in 1776 they'd added 1,000 years onto our timeline. So we're not in 2025, I'm afraid. We're 1,000 years out. And his work was actually supported by 3 leading scientists in Russia, and Einstein was also on the same page.
And is that 1,000 years more or 1,000 less?
1,000 years more, yeah. They created the Dark and Middle Ages to explain a slow evolution in architecture and technology, and it never happened. So through looking into his work, I realised that what they'd done is wiped out a civilization called the Tartarian Empire. And as an example, this is a grocer's store where they forgot to put a 1 in front of the date when they went round and reset. And when I say they, I'm talking about the Jesuits, or parasites as I like to call them. So what you'll find with buildings is they would just put a 1 or an M in front of dates. But they missed a few off. They didn't get them all. And you'll also see that in some old churches and some old buildings that there's the letter J in front of the date. That stands for the millennial reign of Jesus. They now tell us that that's a 1. It's not a 1 because there are lots of dates out there where there is a 1 in the date, and you can clearly see that J is not representing the letter 1, the number 1. So they've falsified lots of things. But with buildings, it was easier just to tell the world that that was a 1, or add a 1 or an M depending on what it was. And these are pictures that I've taken myself. You can see there. Sometimes it's an I, but it's always wrong. And they're everywhere. You'll start to spot them. And what they've done is they've whitewashed history. They've wiped out an entire civilization, claiming that that they wanted everybody to believe that white people were the dominant race, that indigenous people and black people had never actually achieved anything or created anything. And so they went round whitewashing. And it goes on and on. And on. And this was part of, I don't know if you've seen this one before. And so this was to get rid of this civilization called the Tartarians. And the reason they wanted to get rid of it is because they were operating on free energy. All of their buildings would harness energy. And the parasites didn't really want that. With the Industrial Revolution coming and using fossil fuels, there was money to be made in making people pay for fuel and pay for electricity. And this is another example of what they've done. So this is what you'd call a Tartarian building. And they're everywhere, they're all over the world. And Tim and I were looking at some in America earlier on, and you've got them all over the world. They've got this Greco-Roman style, and normally where the backstory falls apart is this particular hospital in Bath. I did some digging on it, and you can see here, these are what they call mud flood windows. So that would have been a floor, and this will probably go down 2 or 3 floors further. And they'll put a window, they'll take a window and actually put a door into it. So you think that actually there's a basement and that's how it was, but you don't build a building like that. Put windows there, which if you went inside that building, the window will actually be present. And it will go down a couple more stories, and then they'll put steps up to the front door, which you wouldn't do. Why would you build a building like that and make it very difficult for people to get in and out of, or carry things in and out of? So it tends to be a window, and they'll put a door there. The interesting fact with this particular place, and these are photos I've taken myself, when I did some digging on the architect, and I recommend you, if you find a building that looks like this in your area, check out the architect. It might not be that particular building that's the anomaly, but if you look at the buildings that they credit that architect with, there'll be at least 2 or 3 that don't stack up. So this particular hospital in Bath, which worked on water therapy, I did some digging on the architect, and who Wikipedia claim was the architect of that building, and he was born the year before that was built. So he was obviously very advanced. So they do make a lot of mistakes. And it wasn't just how they built. These buildings are present all over the world, but it's actually what they did inside them. They worked with something called cymatics, where they work with frequency. So if you went into a cathedral or a church, you'd have pipe organs, and they were designed to work on 432 hertz, which is what your body operates at. And these pipe organs were called pipe organs because they healed human organs. So you'd go into one of these buildings and you would come out feeling a lot better than you did before you went in. But in the 50s, Rockefeller Foundation changed from 432 to 440 all of the church organs, all the church bells, and set the standard for music as well. So everything we hear and listen to now is in the wrong frequency. And you should, in theory, feel euphoric when you listen to music or you go into one of these places, but actually you can come out feeling a lot worse than before you went in. And that was the purpose of these. Perhaps the greatest ruler of Tartaria, or the most famous, would be Genghis Khan. But one that's shrouded in mystery, and perhaps my personal favourite, and why I joined the Freemasons, was King Solomon. I was interested in King Solomon and his temple and in Solomon's mines. But Genghis Khan was the, I suppose, most famous ruler of the Tartarian Empire, and he's not the person that you've been led to believe by a long shot. Yeah. So the Tartarians themselves were every different creed and colour you could possibly think of. And they were more, not just a race of people, but an ethos and a way of building and living. Everything they did was in harmony and balance with the world. And as you can see, the copper dome buildings, they would typically harness and store energy in red mercury tanks. And that would generate power for a small town. And they'd have several of them in cities. So people were running with electricity for free. And for a civilization that never existed, they've actually got a flag, and you'll find it in old atlases as well. And this is a map. This is an old map. You can actually get this online, but this is something that shouldn't really exist. And this map was presented to the president of Kazakhstan by Putin in 2012 when he said he was going to put Tartaria back on the map. And you can see that it's broken into various areas. You've got Chinese Tartary, independent Tartary, but as you can see there, it is pretty much Russia and the Far East. This is actually a globe that I've got at home, and that should say Russia. Another one of their flags. And the owl was actually quite sacred to them. And they had a thing about dragons, but dragons didn't exist. But that's one there. They're still out there, but they don't look quite like what we were led to believe. And what's happened is, since 1776, the Jesuits, with some help from the Vatican and the Smithsonian's Institution, have hidden anything that's been uncovered that connects back to Tartaria. And they were different heights as well. They weren't just like me. They were, a lot of them were quite tall, and that's why you'll see that we would refer to them as giants, actually. That's why you'll see such high doorways in older buildings, and it's so everybody could enter, not just people my height. And whenever they've found, especially in America, whenever they've found a large skeleton, the Smithsonians have immediately taken that, and then they usually end up in a warehouse somewhere that has an asbestos problem, or it's closed to the public, or they lose the skeleton. But the heights, you can see these are actual genuine heights of skeletal remains that have been discovered across the world. That's my wife stood next to a door with one of the largest door locks that I've ever seen in my life. And I know that she stood on a step below it, but that's going into Salisbury Cathedral. Now, why would you have a door that large? Why would you do it? It doesn't make any sense at all unless the people going through it are a lot taller. And can you imagine the size of the key that goes in that? I mean, that's going to be the size of half of my arm. So The same within the Tartaria sort of conspiracy circle with buildings like this is built by giants for giants. And there's some still around. These are Tartarian. And it goes on and on. And you can see that there are a lot of books, musical instruments that clearly weren't made for people of our size. And it's all been covered up. They were even, during the Afghanistan war, they were finding giant remains there as well, and you see this is from the Second World War. As you can see, these people clearly don't have giantism. This isn't a deformity. This is actually how they're made. And of course, a lot of people trace the size due to a high level of oxygen in the atmosphere up until 1776. And that's allegedly why we see such large remains of trees, fossilised trees. A lot of people say that they're natural formations or they're mountains, but these large trees do exist. So everything was a lot bigger. You then fall into this sort of category of what they call meltology. They believe that in 1811 there was some sort of direct energy weapon attack. Now in France they'd call that Napoleon's Comet. But all over the world there were a series of floods, and it was mud, liquid mud. And it literally petrified anything in its path. I think you can probably work out what that is. And some people say, well, you know, that's just a freak of nature, that's just a fluke. But if you want to have a look online, I suggest you do. There are thousands of images of rocks or rock formations that appear to be something other than what they are. That's it from the other angle. So as I said earlier on, the rulers of Tartaria, perhaps my favourite is Solomon. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Gilgamesh and Magog. Magog was the first, so that's Noah's grandson. Japhet, his other grandson, was the first Celt, and Magog was the first Tartarian. There are links also in religious circles to Tartaria being the millennial reign of Christ, a 1,000-year period where everything would be built by the gods and by the angels in balance with the earth. And in 1776, everything changed. So if we take 1,000 years away from the timeline, and you're talking about the millennial reign of Christ, then you're kind of there or thereabouts. In 1776, it would have been 776. Yeah, you're not a million miles away. So people will often correct me and say, you're talking about the Tartarian Empire, but actually, in biblical terms, that's the millennial reign of Christ. That's 1,000 years of peace. And we're now in what they call Satan's little season, which is a 250-year period where Satan is let loose to cause havoc. And the deal is that if they didn't allow this to happen, they were going to cause an apocalypse. And this should, in theory, end next year, the 4th of July next year it should end. And as you probably are aware, the World Economic Forum have currently got us going through a great reset now. So the last one was 1776. The one we're going through now should be the end of this 250-year reign of terror. And there are certain links in Tibet to Genghis Khan and Jesus as well. Some people claim, and I've not dug deep enough on this, that Genghis Khan was Jesus' son. And the images that we see of Genghis Khan are fictitious. And that actually Jesus was approximately 9 feet tall, red-haired, and had two sons, both in Tibet. That's the last queen of Tartaria, and if there are any Star Wars fans here, she was executed in the Second World War while she was pregnant, incidentally. And she was used by Star Wars. So again, Hollywood have this kind of hiding in plain sight, the evidence of our past. So she was, I can't remember her name, I think it's Amalda. This is Anakin Skywalker's wife, Princess Leia, Luke Skywalker's mother. And she's based upon actually the last Tartarian queen. And this is some of their architecture. Now you're going to spot a lot of American buildings in here, and this is how they designed everything. Everything was done using cymatics. So actually, they looked at vibration and the frequency that's emitted inside a room. So the idea being that when music is played within a room, or bells are ringing, or there's a pipe organ playing, that actually you would feel euphoric. A happy people is a more productive people. And here we go again. I mean, this is a typical Tartarian structure. But this is perhaps my favourite one. Starfall, who said that? Yeah, Starfall. These are my favourite. So if you look at, if you subject water, a water molecule to 528 hertz, which is the frequency of the planet, that's actually the shape that it forms under a microscope. Now, according to Wikipedia, these are defensive fortresses, but ironically, the Smithsonian say they have no idea why they are constructed in that way, because not only is that a water molecule at 528 hertz, but that's also aligning to constellations as well. There are 319 of these left on Earth. I nearly said planet then, and I remembered where I was. Incidentally, I don't think for one moment I'm on a ball spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. I think that's absolute bollocks. But some shows I go on, I have to be very careful. And I've just been demonetised on YouTube, so I've got to be even more careful now. So these are worth looking at. They're in every country. We've got them here. There's one in East Tilbury in Essex, and there's one in Plymouth called the Citadel. These are not defensive fortresses. These are actually energy centres.
And the Statue of Liberty.
Statue of Liberty stood on one. Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting about that is that's Lucifer, the statue of Lucifer, who you're supposed to think is some evil demon, but actually is complete opposite. And what they did was they added chains, a broken chain to Lucifer's ankle, to show that in 1776 he was let loose for 250 years. But what's interesting is if you actually look at the date on the statue, the M is out of alignment with the other Roman numerals. They're stuck 1,000 years on. And once upon a time that was a shiny copper statue.
Yeah. So, Guy, just quickly, are you saying that Lucifer was bound, according to biblical things, for like 1,000 years or 1,000 generations or whatever it was?
For 1,000 years,
and
yeah.
you're saying 1776 was his time to have come out of his age?
Beginning of New World Order, yeah. So if you look at the back of an American dollar bill, it's got New World Order 1776. And that was the beginning of what they call, what in biblical terms is referred to as the millennial reign of Christ. But I'd strongly suggest checking out one of these star forts, or seeing if you've got, unfortunately in the Second World War, a lot of these got bombed throughout Europe. But you will have Tartarian buildings everywhere. They'll be in your city, and you can see they're all built in the same way. Their technology as well, harnessing energy from the ether was perhaps the most significant part of their technology. But this I thought I'd show you because this is called the Baghdad battery. This is a 2,000-year-old 9-volt battery. You could run them in sync and generate whatever electricity you needed. So the question is, 2,000 years ago, what were they running with electricity? Well, in Egypt, they had light bulbs. There are hieroglyphs of this particular bulb in Giza. This is the rooftop, and this is how the energy was actually harnessed. So they would come in through through the roof, and then you'd have a capacitor and a series of resonators. This rooftop belongs to the Rothschilds, and that's their house in Aylesbury. And some people believe that they're still running certain buildings in the world using energy from the ether. And this looks very similar to the Tesla Tower, but this is actually New Brighton. And this is one from one of the world's fairs. They appear to have these towers all over the place, what we today call Tesla towers. They also ran electric grids under the road that were in a similar way, I suppose, to if you imagine a bumper car but reversed round. So you'll often see in early images trams and vehicles running around, but there are no tracks, there are no overhead cables, and the energy was actually coming through the road. They've been tarmacked over now, but you can see this one here where it's worn away. Yeah. And again, that's present across the world. Fireplaces was another one as well. The energy from the roof would actually be received by these two posts that go either side of the fire, and then there was radium in the back plate, and that would literally bounce or resonate, if you like, heat through any room. And you can still find these in old houses as well.
Minehead. Is that a Minehead? It says Minehead there.
Oh, where, sorry?
It said Minehead at the top of the thing.
Oh, that's the building I was in Minehead when I took the photo of that. Yeah. So they're in some stately homes and National Trust homes. They're still present. And they were into their technology. They believed, the Tartarians, that they could actually transmit a very early form of, I suppose, Zoom or Skype. They were actually able to transmit. And they also, if you look at this is from the late 1800s. This is a street lamp. This particular one, if you look at the top of it, again shows the same, a smaller version of the same sort of technology that you see on top of these buildings. This, incidentally, was built before they actually had electricity, and they're not gas lamps. And they're everywhere. They also had electric fountains, you can see from the top. There was a small electric charge in the water. So some people will now take electrolytes in their water. The water was already positively charged. And electric cars. Tesla is not inventing anything new there. The first speeding ticket actually ever issued was in New York, and that was an electric vehicle. They were all using electric vehicles. The police department in New York, a lot of the postal services in America were using electric scooters. Electric vehicles were everywhere. But Rockefeller and Henry Ford managed to actually get them outlawed in the early 1900s. You see they're everywhere. And this is how they used to, this is a car park. And you've probably not seen one like that before. So technology was very much the forefront. But a lot of people will, when they think of this sort of technology, will think of Nikola Tesla. And my view is that Nikola Tesla was actually reverse engineering Tartarian technology. They had these as well called automatrons. They were sort of early mechanical robots. So in a lot of cases, where I said in religious terms they'll call it the millennial reign of Christ, this Tartarian empire. People that are seriously into technology will actually call it the Tartarian, the Tartarian empire of free energy, or the Tartarian empire of technology. They were masters. They were using, some will claim, Atlantean technology, and that this is what actually Nikola Tesla was working on. Their mode of transport to enable people to get from one place to the other quickly was airships. And again, that was something that was outlawed by the false flag, the Hindenburg disaster, which was planned to have airships banned. People were travelling freely around the world. And a lot of these towers were actually docking stations. One of the more famous ones would be the Eiffel Tower, an airship docking station that harnessed energy. It's not, again, what you were told it was. A lot of our history has been inverted. And you can see that there are railway lines that predate what we've been led to believe was the beginning of a rail network. So 1776 comes along and the Jesuits decide that New World Order starts. You've got New World Order at the bottom, and 1776 in Roman numerals at the bottom of the pyramid. And that, So, what they did was to get rid of the people from Tartaria, people that knew. We had a series of civil wars. The the Napoleonic Wars perhaps being the largest. So over a period of about 20 or 30 years, civil wars took place across the world, and millions of people were killed, and I believe that they were the people from the old world. And the people that survived were incarcerated in various prisons. You can see what they did. There are catacombs all over the world, and I believe that these are actually displays to show what they did to the people that wouldn't comply to New World Order. So we have catacombs all over the world, civil wars all over the world, and then the sudden emergence, that's the Napoleon comment, the sudden emergence of prisons, asylums and orphanages. Almost overnight, asylums, prisons and orphanages opened all over the world. Thousands and thousands of people literally committed or locked away. And I believe that they're people that wouldn't comply. They killed the majority, and the rest they imprisoned, and then they introduced something called the Lunacy Act. And the Lunacy Act meant that if you lost your husband in battle during one of the civil wars, you were considered insane. So your children became property of the state. And then they repopulated by moving the children around. And in America, you probably know the orphan train movement. They distributed children from all over the world across the Midwest of America to work on farms and down mines. And you'll see that literally then, after the wars and after the mud floods, they started digging these buildings out. And it happened everywhere. And the buildings they didn't want or couldn't explain had fires or were bombed. And you'll see as well a lot of empty streets. So shortly after, and you think that these would have all been taken without the technology we have now, they would have all been taken during the daytime. You'll just see that there are empty streets everywhere and nothing but devastation. This is Crystal Palace in London on fire. They burnt and destroyed everything that they didn't want. Incidentally, this building here is in Venice at St. Michael's. It was the largest library in the world after Alexandria, and it held some of the rarest books in the world, and it imploded in exactly the same way as the Twin Towers did, and no one could understand why not a single person was hurt, but all of the books were destroyed as a direct result. So they've gone around destroying everything, every single trace of an empire, and you can see this is St. Petersburg. There's no one around. There are no people. These streets are empty. So we have devastation, and this goes on into the Second World War with Dresden, which was still operating as a Tartarian city on free energy, and it was one that they needed to get rid of. And so over a series of carpet bombing, really, over a period of several days, they completely annihilated a city that was a hospital city that had no military purpose whatsoever. And they did it on a particular day called Fasching, which is a children's festival when the children went on parade. That's when they bombed. The majority of people were refugees and children that died in Dresden. And so they've wiped out everything they could. And you'll see the top of how these streets once looked, and then underneath how they look today. And they've just destroyed as much as they possibly can, so you don't know what the world used to look like and what these buildings were capable of. And it's just all gone. These are the same streets, and it's all over the world. With regards to bells, I said earlier on that the Rockefeller Foundation decided to go out there and change all of the church bells. We were told in the Second World War that it was to make ammunition. They needed these bells to make ammunition. That isn't the case. What they actually did, if you think about it logically, if they used the bells to make ammunition, how did they replace the bells after the war? Did they go out and find all of the shells and pick the bullets out of people to make them again? Or did they suddenly come up with enough brass to be able to replace them? And what actually happened was most of them were hidden or buried in the ground, and they were all replaced to now operate on 440 hertz. These are the bells that apparently were melted into ammunition to help the war effort. This is another example of a mud flood building. The entrance to the building you actually have to go down some stairs to. This is in Lyme Regis, it's actually not very far away from here. These are photos I've taken myself. And this, you've probably all heard of World's Fairs, and Donald Trump's talking about bringing World's Fairs back anytime soon. World's Fairs were what they called Tartarian cities, and what they decided to do was to show the world what we were capable of, what we could build if we put our minds to it. And they were a little bit like a sort of a technology show as well, where they'd showcase new technology as it came around. This is Crystal Palace in London, and this particular World's Fair, like many other World's Fairs, unfortunately, had a fire. They all have accidental fires, all of them, every single one has had an accidental fire. That's everywhere in the world. That's from Samoa to Crystal Palace to St. Louis. They've all had fires. Within 6 to 9 months of opening, they burn down. Now, you'd need to get up to 4,000 degrees to burn that down, but they achieved it. But the interesting thing with Crystal Palace World's Fair in particular is that, according to the narrative, the architect was from Australia. And with a lot of the World's Fairs, the architect is chosen by entering a competition, and the winner with the best design would get the job. It didn't matter if they had credentials or experience. But the architect of Crystal Palace in London was from Australia, and he entered the competition, and according to Wikipedia, within 2 weeks of him entering the competition, he'd won, and he was on site. He was in Australia. So the letter to tell him he'd won would be sent by ship. He would then get on a ship and come to England. So I worked that out to be 9 months, but he did it in 2 weeks, which I think is pretty impressive. So there's either he had very early technology, perhaps his own private jet, before they were invented, or someone somewhere is lying. So check out any World's Fair, and this is Crystal Palace again in London, built within 9 months. This was built within 9 months. And they built around this tree, apparently. These photos are out there. They're hard to find, but they're out there. This is inside that building. 9 months to construct this. And it goes on and on. There's a colour version there, and on. And this is Paris, as you've probably not seen it before. Again, this is the Paris World's Fair. This is what Paris looked like before they had an accidental fire.
That is the introduction. Every single, I got them in my phone, every single World's Fair, their logo was a globe.
Yeah.
Every single one. So
Yeah.
that is where the globe was introduced to the world, was the World's Fair.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I got every poster in my phone right now.
I've got them as well. I've got all the posters.
So that's where the
Literally.
big lie got started.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, it was a whitewashing and brainwashing exercise. All of these World's Fairs, they happened from the late 1800s into the early 1900s, and it was a whitewash. They were trying to make out that the founding fathers of America, look at what they'd achieved, and look at what we could do if we put our minds to it. We could build these incredible structures. They were already there. These had been there for a very long time, and so it's just a mass whitewashing. And it's the Jesuits trying to make out that the Caucasians are some sort of like master group of people that look at what we could do. It's utter bullshit. In America, it was the Moors that were building this. This is not anything to do with anybody who looks remotely like me. This is people far more intelligent and a lot older. This is Chicago World's Fair. Yeah,
That's amazing.
That's solid gold. But unfortunately, none of this remains because this particular Chicago's World Fair, unfortunately, it had a fire. This was built in under a year. They even managed to put a canal in. And this here is actually an asylum. That was built specifically in America to house the people they wanted off the streets, the people that they didn't want to be part of society anymore. So it seems to me an extraordinary length to go to build something like that to house people you don't want. And a lot of these buildings will say, they won't say when they were built, they will say when they were founded. And what I refer to that is when they found dead. The building was found dead. It was empty. There was nobody there. They repurposed these buildings. This is an early prison, and that's an orphanage. They all look the same. These are not what we think they are. These are energy harnessing buildings that you would go in to study, meditate, and so on. So I mentioned earlier on about the children, that they would take your child away. These are the people that were responsible for it. Charles Loring Brace and P.T. Barnum, the greatest showman in the world, they're the people behind the orphan trains in America. And what they did was they literally took your children and they'd tell you they were going to have a better life working on a farm or working down a coal mine, and would ship them from New York to Midwest America. What actually happened is they would get off the train, they'd be put on a stand outside a Masonic lodge, always a Masonic lodge, and they were asked to perform, and then you could raffle to win one, or you could just buy one. They thought they were being adopted. They weren't. No paperwork changed hands, and often they'd be sold from farm to farm, and that's the orphan train movement. The lady in the the lady at the bottom was a baby farmer, one of the first serial killers in Britain, and she was shipping children to America from London, but in the end they found that she'd actually killed several hundred children that were surplus to requirements. So they're the people behind the orphan train movement and repopulating the Northern Hemisphere. And Dr. Martin Cooney, who isn't really a doctor, is the person who allegedly invented the incubator, and that went on display at the World's Fairs across the world as well. He wasn't a doctor, he had no actual qualifications whatsoever. So they're the people that stole the children. And it's the same old story. This is perhaps one of my favourite of a child mine worker. Obviously that's not his pick, but these are the kids, and that's hence the term miner. That's where miner comes from. It was children mining.
Well, he's got a good point.
Yeah.
Can you just go back to those people who stole the children?
He just wants to get it over.
Guy,
Yeah.
you know they found the incubators and they were showing off at the World's Fair.
Yeah.
Were they literally using that tech and growing kids, making kids?
Yeah. So some of the signs said we'll grow a 9-month baby
Have you seen
in
some of
2
those
weeks.
children? How are they growing? They look 45 years old.
Yeah, they all
What's
have
the deal
old
with it?
faces. Yeah, it didn't kind of work.
No.
And people were buying them as well. So you could buy. The backstory at the Chicago World's Fair was that as we're in England, I'll give you the England one. At Crystal Palace at the World's Fair, the London World's Fair, the children were on loan from hospitals in Paris, which doesn't make sense. But America's slightly stranger because the children on display at the World's Fairs in the incubators there all came from hospitals in New York. So they've travelled from New York across America. These are premature babies to go on display when they're critical. At exactly the same time that they're trying to save the lives of babies, in the papers they're saying that they've got a problem with too many children. The children are everywhere. New York is full of orphans. There are kids everywhere. It's becoming a problem. We're overpopulated with children. So while that's going on, at the same time, we're saving their lives. Babies that would have naturally not made it. We're doing everything we can to save them at a time when we have a problem with too many children. So none of it sort of stacks up. But at the World's Fairs, yeah, they would grow. And that was one of the signs that they'd have on display, that we can grow a baby within 2 weeks. 9 months growth in 2 weeks, I think it was. And you could buy them, you could actually buy the children at these World's Fairs. And then something really strange happened, and this is, a lot of people believe, is linked to human cloning. In the late 1800s, a pioneer filmmaker called Alice Guy, she's from Paris, she brought out a film that she directed and narrated called The Cabbage Fairy. And in it, she's growing babies from cabbage patches, and a couple come along and buy one. They buy a baby from her. She said she was inspired by a series of postcards called the Cabbage Patch postcards, but a little bit of digging into these postcards, which again were hugely popular in the late 1800s and early 1900s, is that actually they're referred to in Russia as repopulation postcards. So the theory is they were growing children, and that this was an exercise in human cloning. What's strange about this one is that there's also dogs, pigs and monkeys being grown in this particular postcard as well. The lady in red is very significant. That's the lady who Richard Branson uses for the Virgin Airlines. And if you've not looked into Richard Branson, look into Richard Branson. That man is... You thought Epstein was bad. He's another level. And he owns all the islands, incidentally, around Epstein's Island. And all the private abortion clinics in the UK. It's also the same dress that Princess Catherine, or Kate, was wearing when she came out of the maternity hospital with George.
Well, and the hand wants the baby.
Absolutely, yeah, Rosemary's Baby, yeah. It's the same dress, it's very significant.
Yeah.
It's to do with, it represents child sacrifice. And this is a statue in Russia outside a maternity hospital. The statue is called I'm an Anna. And as you can see, there seems to be something going on to do with children being born from cabbage patches. I found I just put these ones in because I thought these were quite strange. I don't know if you've ever seen anything like these before.
Is that drinking straight from...
Yeah, sheep's milk's closest to human milk, apparently.
They're replacing that sheep.
Yeah, they're round the other way, yeah, it's actually a bloom. And as I said earlier on, they're called repopulation postcards, really, but it started to get quite sinister in France and Germany. And these then became popular in England and then in America as well. But they started out, I don't know if anyone here speaks French, but that's baby for sale.
Wow.
For sale. Now this is a shop. This is a baby supermarket where you could go in and buy a particular baby. In Paris, in the late 1800s, you could win a baby as a prize in a raffle. And they were repopulating. They were trying to repopulate and get people to adopt. And unfortunately, they were mailing babies as well. They were actually sending them by post across Europe and across America. And here you go. This is one of the most famous repopulation postcards. This is actually showing this. There's a lot of Masonic symbology here. They're actually showing you putting cabbage seeds into the top of a machine and babies popping out of the bottom, which I believe is actually them showing us that this is some sort of human cloning exercise. And you've got a little bit of Masonic symbology going on there. With regard to sort of cloning and is it possible, I sort of, in my book, I've sort of looked into the whole kind of cloning conspiracy and taken it all the way back to the Bible and the story of Adam and Eve, where Eve is actually made from a rib of Adam, and it's your first story. I mean, I'm sure most people in here know about the Anunnaki, and this is what the Anunnaki or the Elohim did to make us, a slave race. But I often wonder if they keep popping the same people out every now and again. And there are lots of these. That's Laura Rockefeller.
On the right.
Yeah, J.D. Rockefeller's. Apparently the woman on the left was quite a good actress. She was Mrs. Doubtfire. I used to love that. That's Martin Cooney, with the strange-looking elderly heads. Yeah, yeah. And this is Chicago World's Fair here, and there he is. There you go, incubator with living babies. The world loves a baby. And you can see why they wanted all of these children and why they needed them, because we had the Industrial Revolution happen, and if you look at any of the images from the Industrial Revolution, it's not the adults doing the work, it is the children.
Yeah, it's like, I can only say personally, but my great-grandparents were both foundlings.
They were foundlings.
They're foundlings. That's what they used to say, they were foundling children or whatever.
Yeah, because they found them.
Yeah.
Yeah, just found them. Yeah, my mum was told she was found at the Cabbage Patch at the bottom of the garden.
Foundling.
Yeah, foundling, founded. Yeah, children are found and put into a founding centre, and buildings are founded.
Because you can't go back on your history and find, or in records, to find anybody before.
No, and you can't believe Ancestry.com either. The problem with Ancestry.com...
I think those are all my brothers.
Ancestry.com is owned by Blackstone. A lot of people confused with BlackRock. Yeah, so that's a little bit of a strange one, because they work on, you know, biochemical weapons and so on. And so I wonder if the reason that Blackstone, own Ancestry.com now is so they can, one, feed us false information so we think our ancestry goes further back than it does, and two, so we can send our DNA off to them to find out who we really are, and then they've got our DNA on record.
Make another one.
Yeah, they can say, right, okay, we can make another one of him, or we can make something to get rid of him.
Yeah. Yeah, but if they make another one, they just send him abroad, and you ain't going to meet, are you?
Well, it depends where abroad you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think they go a little bit further than abroad. I think they go under or over a wall somewhere.
Yeah.
Perhaps made of ice.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Musk has been saying we need more. He's obsessed with populating Mars, isn't he? And Steven Spielberg was tweeting a few years ago, Mars needs more children.
Yeah.
So the Industrial Revolution came along, and these children were needed. And what's strange is that throughout the Industrial Revolution, this is embarking the Brunel.
Freemason.
Yeah, straight in.
Yeah. All in plain sight. So, I mentioned, my book is called Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, but it's about Tartaria, and people say, well, why did you pick that name? And I wanted people to understand that I'm not talking about just a lost empire, an empire that's been wiped from history. It's more than that. It involves Nikola Tesla, the man who gave us alternating current, who's responsible for, allegedly, the lights in here, and everything that we have really today with neon lights and a lot of our technology is down to his over 300 patents. But the strange thing is, for 5 years I've been trying to find out whether this man was reverse engineering Tartarian technology, or he was being given the information by someone, or if he actually ever existed at all. So I've reached out to a lot of people, and his museum actually in Serbia, and there is no video footage of him anywhere in the world, and not a single living descendant, which I find strange, because this was a pioneer of technology. So why is there no video footage of someone that gave public talks, that was invited to dinner parties, to host, and people were paying him to just attend just about anything? But there's footage of Edison and there's footage of Einstein. And the museum said to me they think he might have been camera shy. So I do question whether or not this man existed or not, and if he did exist, was he reverse engineering technology that he had found, or had someone given it to him? And the interesting thing is, with Tesla, it's an anagram of steel, so I wonder if there was a little bit of reverse engineering going on, or some help. He claims that everything came to him in a vision, and he was talking to the Venetians, that he was actually from Venus. That's his backstory. Yeah. And these people here have all been indirectly involved in Tartarian technology. With regard to, I'm sure you all know who Warner von Braun is. I don't know if you're aware that he wrote a book about a little boy that goes to Mars called Elon. That's worth looking into. But these people here are all, and my book explains it in more detail, but they're all connected to technology that didn't exist and writing or inventing it from nowhere. And not a single one of them had any documentation or research to support what they claim to have invented. And there is the great man himself. There's only 2 or 3 images of Tesla are out there, which again I found really strange. And this is the hotel room that he died in. And what's really strange about this is that when he died, the first person to enter the room was Donald Trump's uncle, John G. Trump. And with the help of a safecracker that the FBI brought in, he was able to take all of the files. And this was 2 truckloads of paperwork from Tesla's hotel room to an undisclosed location in New York. But 3 files were never actually handed over by John Trump, and they were all relating time travel.
He was like a top
MIT scientist.
scientist.
Yeah,
wasn't
he worked with the government as well, yeah. And it's quite strange because Ingersoll Lockwood, a lawyer, wrote a series of books, The Adventures of Baron Trump and The Last President are perhaps the 2 most popular ones. And they're about a young boy called Baron Trump who time travels. And his advisor is Donald. And so there are perhaps some connections there. So you've got John Trump takes the files on time travel, books written about time travel by Ingersoll Lockwood about Baron Trump. Now, you've probably all seen Donald's son, Baron. He doesn't look like Donald's son at all, does he? I mean, he's now 6'9", his Russian accent's gone, and he's a very confident 18-year-old. So some people suggest that Baron Trump is the person in the books that were written in the early 1900s.
Have you seen the photo of Julian Assange? Young John G. Trump?
Is it the same person? Yeah, and there's this whole time travel connection with Trump, Musk and Tesla, and people keep telling me, but they do know how to time travel into the future, but no one has the technology at this moment in time or the know-how to travel back. And I keep saying, but by definition, if they have it in the future, the technology, then they can come back now, surely? Sort of doesn't make sense, does it? So there's this sort of conspiracy surrounding these people, and it all links to Tartarian technology and Nikola Tesla. The fella in the bottom left, is it just
No one
me?
likes him.
There's something, isn't there, about him that isn't right. There's something very strange there. And I wouldn't imagine for a moment he could pass a Mensa challenge. So is that what's going on? Is there something weird going on? So the idea of my book is to explain, and my work really, when I looked into Tartaria, to try and find out why they would do this. Why would they wipe out an entire empire? Why would they wipe 1,000 years off of our history? Why would they do that? Well, they reset us. They didn't want us having free energy. They didn't want us being well. The parasites in charge, which the World Economic Forum perhaps is a good example, but it's higher than that. You know, they're just think tanks that are run by the Jesuits through platforms like the Bilderberg Group or the Club of Rome, the Council of 13. These people are controlling everything, and they're resetting us again now. So the reason I decided to write about what happened when they last reset us in 1776 was to show people what they did and how they did it last time. And they're doing it again now. We're going to see fires, we're going to see floods, we'll see the odd earthquake here and there. This is going to ramp up. And I believe forewarned is forearmed. So what I've tried to do is get as much information about what they did to an entire civilization 250 years ago and give people that information now so you can see exactly what's going on. And hopefully, if enough of us are aware of what they did before, we can kind of try our best to stop it, or certainly not participate in it. So that's it in a nutshell. I tried to do it in an hour.
No, it's good.
No.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, can we have another hour's work?
I have a question. Guy, I have a question. Satan's Little Season from 1776, 250 years.
Yeah,
Puts it in our calendar for next year. That's the end.
4th of July next year, yeah.
And what do you think would, or what are you expecting, or what evidence have you found?
Things are going to get a lot worse.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know if you're
on that
aware.
happy note, thanks for coming.
I think that the difference is that. Are you aware of what happened in Spain and Portugal?
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see a lot more things like that happening. I mean, we know what happened in 2020. I think they're going to be, we'll more than likely have another outbreak, another pandemic of some description. They have been trying to get another one out there. So I think they're going to try and do that. And obviously, they know that certain people are going to resist. And as I was saying earlier on, that when we were having dinner, that I wonder if COVID was a test, and not a test to see who was going to fall for it, but actually to earmark the people that didn't. Because as Einstein used to say, that, and Stephen Hawking too, that the trouble with us believing in aliens is, and the reason they felt that they never contacted us and sort of turned up in the field over there, is because our natural reaction would be to try and fight them, destroy them, or run away. But the theory is that the people that didn't take the vaccination are probably more likely to welcome them than the people that did. So was it a test? Can I bring them back in a minute?
You can. Sorry about that.
So was it a test? Was it to see who can get through the next reset? Who's going to be guided through it? And who, unfortunately, has to stay behind? And the people that we would refer to perhaps as sheep, I call them NPCs. Sometimes I wonder if a lot of people that I walk past in the street, when they get around the corner, do they just disappear? Do they actually exist? Are they just there? So I think there's something going on when there isn't. So a lot of people think that actually the COVID was the reverse, it was inverted. It was to see who can come on this next journey, who's going to get through this reset. And the reset is one of enlightenment. So who's going to raise their frequency and go back to how things were before?
No, I'm going to get better.
Pardon?
It's just going to get better.
Yeah, so in theory, but I think, like someone said to me the other day, my husband is fully vaccinated, he thinks all of this stuff's nonsense, he thinks we're on a spinning ball, he thinks that everything I say is nuts and I should be locked up. What can we do with him? And I said, you can't save everyone. You can't. And it's just not how it works. Exactly that. And I think that it is survival of the fittest, but I think this is more of a spiritual awakening than anything else. Who actually is prepared to accept what's coming, rather than they're trying to kill everybody that takes the vaccination. I think they're trying to actually see who's going to stand up and say no, who's open to what could possibly be coming next.
Just, sorry, I want to carry on talking a bit. With the Christ thing, the millennial reign of Christ, which Christ are you talking about? The Christ of the Bible? Are you talking about the Christ of the New Testament?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So in religious circles, they'll say millennial reign of Christ. Yeah.
And at some point, he's coming back.
No.
According to.
Yeah. No, he's been and gone. Yeah.
And
so,
that's it. That's
yeah,
it. So
that's
When
it.
did he come back?
Well, he didn't go. So he was obviously born 3 BC, as we know, and I believe a lot of Tartarians believe that he in 1776 he left or died. People used to live. If you look at how long Noah and these people lived for, it's hundreds of years.
And the mud flood.
Mm-hmm.
That are we attributing, or do you attribute the mud flood and the cataclysmic disaster of a worldwide phenomenon to the waking or the unboundment of Lucifer, for example?
It's symbolic of that, but people will tell you, people who think we're spinning on a ball will tell you that it was a pole shift, but that caused that. But of course, you can't have a pole shift if the Earth's flat. Direct energy weapons is my suspicion.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
There's a device worth looking into called the Vajra. It's a ritualistic tool used by Hindus, and it's actually called the thunderbolt, and they believe that that is what the lightsaber is based upon. So direct energy weapons have been around for a very, very long time, thousands of years. So I think it was a series of attacks by the Napoleon's comet in 1811. I think that was a direct energy weapon. So I think that's what they needed to do to get the temperature up to melt what they melted.
Well, same as with the airships, if they'd got lasers on the airships.
It's exactly what they were doing. Yeah, and Archimedes worked on a device that magnifies the sun's rays, and could literally burn ships.
Now you get the parabolic mirrors now. Can you
Yeah.
Okay. I've seen sorry, I keep talking. I'll just carry on. I've seen some images of, you know, the magnetrons in churches that you see,
Yeah.
big rose windows. Energy would come in and also out of those.
Yeah.
And I've seen things whereby, for whatever reason, they change the frequency to use it as a harmful thing against ships.
Yeah.
So they can take that frequency out of that pretend church, healing centre, and use it as a weapon.
Yeah, and that was the same was happening with the bells as well. At 432 hertz, certain people couldn't tolerate that particular frequency, so stayed away. So they'd ring the bells to keep away certain people.
Big bad people that can't resonate with the natural cycle.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, certain bloodline families apparently have an issue with that.
To do with blood.
RH null.
Yeah, I wonder if it is.
Yeah, it's the RH null, golden blood. Yeah, it's not RH negative. That's a bit of misdirection there. It's actually RH null that causes a problem for.
Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Yes. Let me go and grab the mic and take it off. Oh no, I'll tell you what. From what I know, magnetrons in microwaves do a certain thing with the frequency of the microwave, but magnetrons in the church windows, you know, you see the all make cymatic pattern.
Yeah.
Those.
The rose windows,
And through the resonance of either the pipe music, the water, whatever they did, it could be used to push out the frequency through that window and do damage.
Yeah.
So,
And in
I don't think
reverse.
it's just one way. I think it was you could manipulate frequencies in those buildings
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
That's exactly what they were doing, and it worked better through crystal. So there's a lot of church stained glass windows have been changed. So they used to be crystal glass, and they'd be in the colours that represented each chakra. And now, if you go in, a lot of them have been changed. So a lot more modern. You know, I was in a church the other day where the stained glass window was basically showing images of soldiers in the Second World War. So it's relatively quite recent.
Jack, one over there, one at the back, one here. We got loads. Here, you can shout. Let them use that. Jackie, I'm coming to you first. Go.
Thank you. Did I miss what you said about the giants? Why are there no giants now?
Well, there are, but it's outside.
But not as massive as...
Why did they? Well, you're supposed to believe that that's a myth, that giants never existed. It's mythology. They don't want you to think that anything other than Darwin's theory of evolution took place, that we naturally evolved, which of course we didn't. I mean, I burn in the bloody sun. I've not evolved at all, have I? You know, most of us hit a certain age and have a bad back. I mean, how on earth is that evolution? So a lot of things have been discredited and put down to mythology. There's a really interesting author called John Hamer, and he proposes that...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well,
Saw him on Saturday.
oh, did you?
Yeah. He was at the barn in Ledbury.
I love John,
He's very
but I haven't spoken to him for about 6 months now. But he said that dinosaurs didn't exist, that actually...
Thank you very much. That dinosaurs are actually the remains of giant bones and other creatures that we would consider to be mythological. No, dinosaurs didn't. I mean, the T-Rex, for example, the arms are the wrong way around. Put them on their back. There were wings, for Christ's sake. It's a big bird, you know.
But how do you explain those little figurines that were discovered in Peru, which are beings, some of them with
Tiny, aren't they?
faces, riding dinosaurs?
So how do I explain?
Yeah, there is.
Sorry.
If dinosaurs,
They were made out of clay.
Yeah.
Are they not?
and there was a talk about it at Gloria Moss's thing last year.
They're on display in a museum in Peru, aren't they?
But there are thousands and thousands of them.
Yeah.
And they're not very well. They don't really advertise them.
No. I think a lot of things have been put out there to misdirect us and falsified, but I'm not necessarily with John Hamer in every single dinosaur didn't exist. I think there were creatures that looked like them, but I think they're mythological. What we would refer to as mythological. So I believe...
Baru figurines, they're called.
No, it's not something I've looked at. It's probably more John's area than mine, but I just have a feeling that that when they find a large bone and they say, well, that was a T-Rex or it was a Triceratops or whatever it was, that actually they're trying to misdirect us from mythological creatures, and giants would come under that category. The animal or creature that the Tartarians worshipped was the griffin, and they believed that the griffin mated for life, and that when its partner died, it would never take another partner. It stayed loyal to its deceased partner and died alone. And that was sabotaged by the Catholic Church, who then used it to represent the sanctity of marriage and staying together forever. So if it's a mythological creature, the griffin, just as an example, why does it appear in so many different cultures when they, at the same time, when they couldn't communicate this information? So I think there are a lot of animals out there we can't explain, and some of them may be what we refer to as dinosaurs, but I think they're perhaps something slightly different. But I also think things have been put out there to misdirect us too. There's a lot of false documents out there and paintings that have been created that perhaps aren't as old as we've been led to believe. I don't know if that really answers your question. Dinosaurs isn't my thing, I just don't believe in it.
Well, but also in southern Argentina, there's supposed to be dinosaurs that were the size of dogs, but when I went there, the museum was shut for the day, so I couldn't see them.
What a shame.
Yeah.
Timing's everything, isn't it? Oh, according to my wife. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. In Ancient Apocalypse, Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock talk about giants, civilizations that all talk about giants who had this like superior knowledge that were wiped out, and especially Randall Carlson talks about the mud floods and cataclysmic events that happened and wiped out civilizations. Do you go along with what they say in that program? Have you watched it?
I haven't watched it, no, but I've read some of Graham's earlier work.
He's been getting all architects and archaeologists and trying to debunk everything he's talking about as all fake, and he's got this fantastic factual program that just says, well, you're all lying. It's all, he's found these fantastic labyrinths of where people lived underground, where obviously these mud floods and whatever have wiped people out, but they're just trying to debunk everything he's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, he was the one that brought us the Younger Dryas period, and that was pseudoscience, wasn't it, when he first started talking about that sort of 20 years ago, and then it was proven to be factual. So I'm a huge fan of Graham Hancock, but sometimes I wonder, when you get to a certain level, a bit like Joe Rogan, I used to years ago like Joe Rogan, and I think once you get to a certain level, do they get to you? Are you got at? Is it possible to have that kind of presence and popularity without being approached by
Joe
that many?
Rogan will not have a flat earther on his show, period.
Sorry?
Joe Rogan will not have a flat earther.
Doesn't surprise me. Won't talk about Tartaria either.
Yeah.
Someone asked me if they said they could get me on his show, and so I sent them a book, and there was a bit of correspondence. Nothing. But the first thing I'd say to Joe if I met him is, when did they get to you?
Yep.
You're full of shit, Joe.
He's allowed to talk to what he's allowed to talk to.
Yeah. Now he's a walking advert, isn't he, for Tesla?
Hi. So you mentioned about the fact that when with Tartaria and all the people that died and the people that survived were then put into asylums and buildings and imprisoned. don't you think that's what they're planning for us?
Yeah.
Don't you think that maybe now that they know the people who are not going to be brainwashed, are not going to follow what they want, instead of you saying that there's this spiritual, that we're all going to survive and whatever, maybe these FEMA camps that they've got, that they've built around the country, this is their plan for us, that we're raising our heads and saying, we're not going along with this, we don't believe you, and so now they know who they're going to round up.
That's actually something I lie in bed worrying about at night, because I've already been told to expect a knock on the door.
Yeah.
So that is something that I do worry about, but people tell me that actually no, this is to incite fear. And that's all it is, that actually this reset is about us raising our frequency and we're going to overcome. But yeah, you know, when I got sort of the police on my doorstep during the pandemic for stuff I'd been saying, and I lost my Facebook account and Instagram, and you know, now YouTube had demonetised me and everything. I kind of thought that I was going to be one of those people, and I'm sure if it happens, you know, I'm on the list. I don't doubt that. The Freemasons are going to want to deal with me at some point, I'm sure, is what I've written about. So yeah, I totally agree with you. It's something that I think about quite a lot, especially, I live in the middle of nowhere on a farm, and if I hear the dog bark or something late at night, I think, okay, it's now. They're coming, yeah, they're coming to get me. I've been warned twice. So yeah, I'm kind of waiting to go in one of those camps myself.
Guy, we've got another question from Amanda. Amanda, you can't see around the back there. Come here, Amanda. Come here.
Oh, bless you. Let's go around the other way.
Just going back to the rose windows that we were talking about, I did a little visit to Salisbury Cathedral, and I then was told about the water meadows,
Underneath.
which all lead to the cathedral.
Yeah.
Which made me think, you know, if it's an energy house, it's like a cooling system. And then a friend of mine said, oh, so you're at the cathode? And I was like, what the fuck's a cathode? I didn't know what a cathode was, excuse my French. And then I looked up the cathode, and I looked up the anode, and together they work to create water of a pH level of 11.5, and they have some sort of seal around it, as they can change from plus to minus.
Yeah.
And so you could have healing water as well as the acid, alkaline water as well.
Yeah.
So that blew me away really, because you know, that can heal cancers and all sorts of things.
Is that the original holy water, do you think?
Yeah.
The original holy water.
Yeah, all cathedrals are built on the same basis. So that's where the word comes from. It's cathode rao.
Yeah.
It's not a religious building at all. It's nothing to do with it. And they're all built on ley lines, underground water systems. And yeah, you're exactly right.
She told me that it's floating.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
And she
Yeah.
put the water stick down. But if you go in there, it's phenomenal. And if you get in there, if anyone wants to go and see it, because you can see the cage in there.
Yeah.
That the family, the posh family, sit in. And when them organs are going, they must be getting some real good.
Yeah. Well, they would have done, but they've changed it to 440.
Yeah.
Now, but it was 432. Yeah. There's some strange. There's a lot of Masonic symbology. It's all you spotted it. Yeah. I got asked what I was looking at, and this I don't know what she was actually. Pastor, I think. She came over and started asking me questions, and she said, "Do you understand what you're looking at?" I said, "Well, I'm ordained, and I'm a master Freemason. I've got a pretty good idea what I'm looking at." Yeah.
Guy, we've got another one here. We'll come to you just a second, love. Yeah. Go.
Guy. Well,
Yeah.
apologies for this.
Sorry, I can't.
I'm here.
Oh, hello, mate.
Guy, come on now.
I don't know why I thought it was.
Okay, so I missed the early part of your presentation. Apologies. You were talking about the Moors. I don't know about the Moors that they disappeared from Spain in that area.
Yeah.
So what's the history? Can you remind us?
Well, the Moors originated from North Africa, and they were nobility, and they are responsible for a lot of the architecture, the palaces that we see across Europe and in America. And in America, what they basically did was whitewash the Moors. So they came out with this story that anybody in America that wasn't white was either indigenous or brought over as a slave. These people built every single temple and Tartarian or Greco-Roman building in America, and they were nobility, and they'd been discredited, and they whitewashed. They built the World's Fairs, all of those cities in America, at least down to the Moors. They were part of the Tartarian ethos and part of the Tartarian Empire, and perhaps one of the most advanced and most noble races of people in the world.
Thank you very much. I'll enjoy discussing that with anybody in the pub.
But yeah, I mean, that's who they would say, you know, the idea was to literally whitewash history and discredit the Moors. The Moors were, they're as good as it gets.
Founders, basically, weren't they?
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
So I had a look at some of the structures through the internet of the America, Grand Canyon. Some really old stuff in there, which looks like old.
It is Egypt, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There's like Sphinx type stuff there.
Yeah.
Do you know any more on that?
No. I know bits and pieces, but you know they're onto something when you can no longer access it. Yeah, and there were sphinxes there. I mean, there were temples inside the Grand Canyon. It looks like the Grand Canyon to me looks like they were mining there. I would imagine mining copper, because copper is what they typically use to conduct electricity. So I've seen the Sphinx. Apparently its head fell off and rolled away in the Grand Canyon. But yeah, Grand Canyon and Egypt were almost identical.
Interesting that they don't let people go in that area, do they?
No, and if you try, then apparently there's literally helicopters unmarked within seconds. But some people have got in there, haven't they? I think got in there and had a look round. But yeah, I'd try. I'd happily give it a go.
That's the same as the national parks. Anything that we're not supposed to see, they will cover it up. There's a place in Greenville, South Carolina called Harris Mountain, and it's exactly like that castle that we hit Windsor, but it's covered up with dirt.
Yeah.
I mean, it's everywhere. Perfectly square rocks in the middle of the woods. You know that was there at some time.
It was wasn't that railroad tracks that in the woods, like that picture?
There's places in America, exactly. We just done the tour of Windsor yesterday, so we live near Asheville, North Carolina, which is the Biltmore House. Basically, I mean, this one's bigger.
Yeah.
But it's the exact. You can tell it's the exact same people that built it. That built this over here. So what they've done is, I believe that they went there as a government, and then placed government, but there's no way possible that house was built when they say it was, you know, and
the horse and buggy and no power.
Yeah, no, I mean it's crazy, and now they're trying to. I don't know if you heard about the flood that went down through there. So now they're trying to take all the land back from the people that are around it, because supposedly there's minerals underground.
I think the buildings in America were Moors, they're Moorish.
Yeah, if you look at what you was talking about earlier about the America being the promised land, let's just call it that. If you put the Missouri River with the Mississippi River, it is actually the longest river in the world, which would be the.
It's the same river, they just named it different things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, during the, is it the New Madrid quake that the Mississippi actually changed direction?
Oh yeah. I've got proof on that too.
Yeah, metal objects flying through the air and.
Yep. And there's names over there like Memphis, and there's a pyramid in Memphis, Tennessee.
Yes, yeah.
So all these names came from Egypt and all these other places that would So the question is that the original and they renamed other places? Or did they name in America, which we've been told?
I think America's the original.
Yeah.
I think it predates. Yeah.
Same as the Sphinx.
It's just a bit of a tip.
Have you
If you want to go to Salisbury Cathedral, it costs a fortune to get in, so just tell them you're going to pray, and you get in for free.
Do you?
Excellent. That's really good. Thanks for that.
Same with the well.
Same with the well.
Probably all cathedrals.
I guess it's the same with everyone, right? So, thank you for that.
I didn't know that. I did think about. I've still got my dog collar in the cupboard. I did think about wearing that actually, see if I could get him for free.
Guy, back in the room. Our regular Tony comes from Kent.
Hi there, Guy.
Hello, Tony.
It's all very interesting, and so much has been kicking off in the last couple of weeks that are of interest to all of us. And one of the things that kicked off on the 18th of April, it's everywhere, is that this, I'll read from the Daily Mail, the US government announces that technologies that can manipulate space and time.
Yeah.
So they've actually now want to admit that they can do it. Interesting that it's the Trump government that are admitting it. And this, I think this is connected with John Trump. Also, if they can do this space and time manipulation, space and time gravity is the definition used by Einstein. But if they can manipulate space and time, and they've been doing it for a while, this now sort of links in a bit to the Mandela effect.
Yes, it does, doesn't it? Yeah, I'm with you on that totally, and I think it's no coincidence that Trump's talking about. Well, this has come out during Trump's. Well, he's not been in office very long, has he? During his second term, and you know there is evidence to suggest that his uncle has the time travel documentation. The Mandela effect is a strange one. I don't know what's going on there, but sometimes I think it's connected to deja vu, but it's not really my area.
It's the rewriting of history in real time.
You think?
Oh,
And gravity, I don't know where you are with that, but I think that they're talking about relative density. Relative density. I think gravity doesn't really make any sense. No, I don't think so.
And could I just ask as well, where does the 250 years come from? I understand the 1,000, but where is 250 years? Where did that come from?
This is what, in religious circles, they talk about. There are groups on Facebook, actually, you can take a look at, where they actually call themselves the Millennial Reign of Christ, and they all refer to it being a short season of 250 years, and that it was agreed, it was predicted, it's in early scriptures that it would be a quarter of the period of the millennial reign, which is 250 years. But how they know that, I don't know. But it's supposed to end 4th of July next year, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, that's why I'm corrected quite a lot when I talk about Tartaria. I'm told, a number of people say to me, "You're talking about the millennial reign of Christ. We're in Satan's little season now. This is New World Order. Blah blah blah. It's 250 years." So this is quite well known in that circle. But where they got the 250 years from apparently is old scriptures.
It's not in the Bible.
No, it's not in the Bible. But then half the good stuff isn't.
Yeah. It does speak about the Satan's little Caesars.
Satan's little Caesars in there, but not the actual period of time. But the Bible, it's the Book of Enoch's the best part.
The millennial reign is in the Book of Enoch.
Yeah, the Book of Enoch is the one and the Book of Thomas is another good one to read. But the Book of Enoch, you could throw the rest of it away and just read that. You'd be slightly better off for it.
Tells you the truth.
Exactly. Yeah, which is why it's not included. But it still is in the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible. I believe they've still got all the books in there. Yeah.
Any other questions, guys?
Go on. How do we raise that frequency?
How?
Love and above. Love and above.
Yeah.
What did you
I don't need to answer that. That's exactly. I mean, you know, there are things that we can do. What you watch and what you listen to. I mean, for example, like, you know, you were talking about the Daily Mail. I wouldn't read a newspaper. I don't watch the news. I won't have any form of I'm not interested in what the TV's doing. I'm very careful what I listen to. So I listen to music in C major or 432 hertz, which is like Beatles, John Lennon, Bob Marley, Prince. You think of someone that's been killed and they're in 432 hertz. Or classical music, you know, if you raise your own vibrations. So, you know, if you put, for example, now if we dimmed the lights and put Nissan Dorma on, people would probably be moved by that. Whereas if we put on some rap or something like that, which was designed to make people angry and sort of provoke us, I suppose, into sort of wanting to hate and fight and be angry. You can raise your frequency by what you're listening to, who you hang around with as well is important. There are people out there that just want to zap your energy. So, you know, you can avoid certain things that are going to lower your frequency, but, you know, in the end, it is true. It's a bit of a cliche, but all you need is love. Just get rid of the hate. You know, stop hating. It's such a waste of energy. Just love.
Acts of kindness.
Absolutely. Or acts of random kindness. Ark. Yeah, as in Ark of the Covenant.
I was going to say.
Any more questions? Any more questions, Gary? Okay.
Well, listen,
Ladies and gentlemen, and Guy, first and foremost, thank you. Thank you very much for coming and doing this. Ladies and gentlemen, Guy Anderson, can I just say that we appreciate everyone that comes to do these things, and Guy has his book out, which is Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids. Very reasonable. I think the paperback's 13 quid, hardback is 20 quid. There's not many left. If you'd like to buy one, please see Guy afterwards. But for now, a big Flat Earth Social thank you to Guy Anderson.
obviously talk amongst yourselves now. Go and get a drink and crack on.
Thank you very much, Guy. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.